designed, right? So and handled. And by using an Axios library, we configured that. Now, next important in React.js, today we will see one more very important client side. So we will learn about client side validation. So how we can handle validation client side, which is very important in web development. So when you design a form and working with the form, so validation is nothing but validation is the process of verifying user input. Validation is the process of verifying user input. So technically, it verifies the user input. And why we need validation? Because validation is required. Validation is required to ensure that contradictory and unauthorized data is not get stored into database. Contradictory and unauthorized data is not get stored into the database. So technically, contradictory means the data which we are not expecting. That means we are expecting number, it is sending string. So that is contradictory. And unauthorized means we are expecting some 5 range, it is sending 20, that is unauthorized. So we need to restrict the data. And generally, validations usually web developers client side, we can do with JavaScript, we can do with jQuery, we can do in Angular and in React, whatever you are using front end. But JavaScript jQuery problem is in JavaScript and jQuery, all the validations we have to manually write, manually configure the validations and deal with them. In React, validations are handled by using some predefined libraries that makes the validation process more simplified. So client-side validation with JavaScript and jQuery, whatever you have learned, it's little lengthy. So we need to write conditions. Already we learned, if you remembered, if I have to verify password strong or weak, then you saw that on key up, we have to write an event. That event will verify the values. It will verify with regular expression. Lengthy logic we have to write. So now the React.js that we are using client side, React.js provides some predefined libraries. With that, verifying the value, validating the value, showing the messages about the problems in the value, all that becomes very easy. So one of the popular library, so React.js uses the library. One of the popular library used by React.js is called Formic. Formic is one of the popular library, so which is used by React.js for validations. What is the advantage of this library is it will verify the values, validate the values, and report the problems. So that is good. So it makes the designing very easy. Right? That makes the designing very easy. So how do we handle that? How to use this Formic? We will see how we can configure and how do we work with that Formic. Actually, in order to use that Formic, we have to download and install that Formic library. we need a separate library. We have to download and install that library. Once the library is installed, so then we can easily use it. We can easily use it. So let's see how we can use an additional library, how we can configure, and what that Formic library works, how that works. Usually Formic library we can install from our package manager. So by using package manager, we can install the Formic library. So let's install the Formic library for our project. So let's open the terminal here in the project shopping. So right. So this is the project, our CD shopping. And in this, we have npm install Formic. So we have to install this Formic library. So once you download and install the Formic library, you can use this Formic library for creating the forms and validating the forms. So let's see how we can use that, how we can configure and use it. So these are all additional libraries. There are several libraries. You can use any, but these are some popular ones that React people use regularly. So now, what is the advantage of these libraries? They will provide separate functions. Those functions will validate your values without writing much logic. So let's see how to do that. So first step is, after installing Formic, let's go to the project. In the project in SRC folder, I will create a new file. So form validation. So form validation.js. Okay. Let's create this form validation here. I am importing, we need to import React from so React library, React from React library. And we have to import, so we have to import. Another option is in order to use validations, you need use Formic. You need use Formic class from the Formic library. From the Formic library, you have to import this use Formic class. So this is required for validations in React.js. Now let's create a function. That means we are creating a function. So functional component, we are creating a function, validate product or form validation. Form validation. Okay, form validation is the function. So this function should return. This function should return some page. So it should return some presentation. So what's the presentation it should return, how it should return, we can configure that. Actually, this can use the properties, those properties can handle. You can write in a shorthand way, because already we learned lambda type. Then what you do is you can write like simply a constant, and that is form validation. So form validation, and this takes a parameter called some product data. Okay, that parameter. So and this function will return some functionality. What the functionality it should return, we will design. So that is configure. We will configure what it has to return. We will design. Now, actually, this is form validation, and the form validation, it should validate the form. We will create a component, another component for registration. That means we are creating constant register form, and this register form so is a function so which will return a simple functionality. So it will return so a design. Let's keep a design. So the design is nothing but register product heading. We say register product. In that we need to create a form. So we have a form. In the form I will just give a div or simply here. Just roughly I am giving a label, and this is the product name. And for that we need a text box. We keep a div input type is equal to text. That is for entering the name. We are configuring the text box.
पाई भल बुझे कहीं भाई देखा बुझल ना हम भल बागे को जरा कांगा मैं पाई लो जो तो याद है अगली
Yes, so here we are configuring all other details like whatever you want to define. Like for example, I want to define another div, and this is label, and label is price, and in that div, and in the div we have input type is equal to text. So and that is the option another div. So and here I will just put a label. So and I will configure that some product code something. Okay. Now that another text box so to be defined. So input type is equal to text, right? That's the option we need to define. So usually this is the basic approach how we can configure and define the form. Okay, and we need a button called register. So I will keep a div, and the button I will keep that as register. Okay, this is entirely inside the form. We are designing a form. Okay, this is the form we are having, register form. That register form is returning some content. What I will do is, so we will react dot render. It should render that register form, and input document get element by ID, and here is root get element by ID. Right. So this is just the register form, and we are rendering it. But one more important point is generally, currently now we are working in a separate file. Now this function that we created, so register form, must be exported from the file so that only after exporting we can use it. So what we have to do is we have to export default that register form. Once you export that register form, now what you can do is, so here we can simply integrate that into index page. An index page, I will import it. So import, so register form. So from the file, that is a form validation. Okay, and we have to use that register form. Only form, we don't have anything else. Let's run this here, npm start. So we are running this and configuring it. Okay. Now only the form is designed. Now when user submits the form, I want some validations to happen. That means I should not allow everything to submit. I want to restrict. I need to configure the validations and restrict it. There are several techniques of validating, and various libraries are available for React.js. They can use the libraries according to their convenience, right? And Fabric is very popular library, so use it for validations. That's the reason we are looking at. So here React DOM somewhere not defined something. So form validation, right? So we import another one is from React. Already React DOM is imported there. Once check. React DOM is already imported here. Right. You can see the form is ready. We have designed a form. Now this is a simple form. So, and the form is configured with the details. So we have like name and other details defined and the handle here. So let's go to the index page. Yeah. So in that index page, we have that body. Okay. Fine. Now this is the output for the contents. This. Now I will go into the validation form. In the validation form, this is the div. So suppose I am defining style, and the style, so some margin left as suppose some 30 pixel I define. Just roughly. Now the form is there, but we need some validation for the form. When user clicks the register button, I want to fire up the validations and verify that name is not empty, price is not empty, product code is not empty, and product code is according to the pattern. Name is string, price is number, like that. We need to verify. Name has more than 4 characters. That means we should not allow to submit directly. We need to validate that. Generally, if I have to do this work in JavaScript and jQuery, we need a lot of methods to write. Here, how we can manage without writing much methods. So how we can manage without writing some methods for validation. Here also so many techniques are there. We can keep the shortest technique and implement that in our applications. We can keep the shortest technique and use and implement in our application. So here generally how we can first configure the validation. Observe, when form is submitted, I need to make sure that so name is having a value, it's not empty, and it is less than 4 characters or more than less than 10 characters, like that conditions. Price is required, product code is required, it needs a pattern, such things we need to verify. So for that, what we do now is first we will go to a function, form validation function. In this form validation function, we will call this form validation function and we will pass all the form data into it. When we pass the form data, that means form data contains name, price, and code. We have to collect that and validate here. You write validations for the form data. So here I am creating a constant called errors. Errors is an object. It's an empty object. Okay, errors is an object. Now what we are doing is, so here we are writing the validation for name. If product data dot name, we will pass the name into it. Later we will pass that. From where we will pass, we'll say. If name is not defined, that means if name is not defined, so this indicates defined, not means it's not defined, that means name is not entered. Then in errors we will put a name. Errors is an object. Into the errors object we will put a name property. For name we should display message product name required. That means this errors object contains a name property that will store a message called name required if name is not defined. That's good. For example, we will write another condition, else if product data dot name is less than 4. If it is less than 4, then errors dot name, the message should be like name too short. It should be like name too short. Minimum 4 required. This message should come. Name too short, minimum 4 required. This message should come. So that is the validation for name. Similarly, you write validation for all of them. So write another. If not product data dot price, so errors dot price. For price we will put a message, so product price required. This message we will define, required, product price required. And here so we will check multiple conditions. Is it number or not? We will verify that. That means we can also write else if not, so is not. So you can simply say that is NaN. You have an option like is NaN. Is NaN means is not a number. Is not a number, product data dot price. That means if it is not a number, then errors dot price, it should say that price must be a number. That is how we write. Is NaN, so is to verify whether it is a number or not, it is a string or not. We can verify by using type of operator also. Type of operator is to verify what data type it is and handle it. It depends on your requirement how you want to configure. This is price. Another, if product data dot code, so product data dot code, if not defined, then errors dot code, and I need to display message product code required. And for example, product code is also having a validation pattern, that means else if I am writing here the validation pattern. That means if it is not matching with pattern, I need to display some. How to write pattern? So double slash, I am writing that, so A hyphen Z, so then 3 characters, and 0 hyphen 9, so that is 2 characters. Like this I define. Like this I define. So, and you see here, you create an option like not. So that means if it is not matching, how to test our value is matching with this or not? That means we have to use dot test method. We have to use dot test method. Test what? Product data dot code. That means whatever code you entered, it is tested against this pattern. And if it is not matching with the pattern, then display a message, errors dot code. The message will be, so invalid code and invalid code. That is the message to display. This is how we have to write the conditions for all the fields. I will show you more simple also. That means we will see more simple technique also, how to handle the validation. But there are various techniques. This is one regularly used. Another is we can use a ready-made component which can handle the validation easily. I will show you that point also. But this is regularly used. Now, all the validations are defined in form validation. All the validations are defined in form validation function. Now, what should happen is this function should return all the errors. So I will finally write like return errors. That means whatever errors are captured, return those errors. So the form validation function is returning errors object. That object contains errors for name, price, and code. Okay. Now, when to show these errors? When registration form is having a problem. So this registration form should use the formic library. That means we create a constant formic. So formic is equal to use formic. Use formic method will define initial values. Initial values means what values you want inside the form. Initial values is an object that contains key and values. Form, keys and values. So name is a string. Okay. Then price is a number. And code is also string, or code is also a string like this. These are the initial values you are defining. That means use formic will tell what are the values to be collected. Okay. Then after collecting the values, we have to validate the values. For that, we have to use a validate property. Validate. Now validate indicates what to validate. So validate indicates what to validate. That means it should validate these all details. That means form validation function must be used by validate. So validate should use form validation. That means it will use that function and verify the values. So that is another point. Next point is on submit, we have to collect all the values. That means formic will collect all the values on submit. So it uses on submit. On submit, it will collect all the values and it will return the values. I will just put an alert in that JSON.string file. JSON.string file will convert all our values into JSON format and display. We can directly display. So usually when we are sending to API, we convert that into JSON. It will convert all the data into JSON and return it. So contains 3 details. What are the values you need to collect from form? And what is the validation function used to verify those values, and collect the values and display the values on submit. Now, these initial values must be binded. These values must be binded with this text. That means they must be binded with the text box. In two situations, we need to bind. That means what we should do here is for name, two situations. That means when you want validation to fire up. I want validation to fire up when any change happened inside this text box, or when it loses focus. Loses focus means blur. That means what we will do is, when you want the actions to fire up, and what is the value you need to bind with? First, this should bind with formic name. It should bind with formic name value. So we have to use like this. So value is equal to, so here value is equal to, it should bind with formic values. In that formic value, so in the formic values, so we are using name. That means from formic, it will collect the values and bind the name value here. That means it will bind that name here. So initial values are accessible by using values. Similarly, I need to bind price. So price value must be binded with formic dot values dot price. It should bind with price. Formic, right? And similarly, code should bind with value. It should bind with formic, and in the formic we have values. In the values we have code. So we have code. These are the options need to be binded. So we are binding these three details. So that is the name and the price and the code. The name, price, and the code. These are the details to be binded. Okay. But the point is, when you want the values to be verified, that means I want the values to be verified in several situations. One situation is when form is submitted, then form on submit, we have to write formic dot handle submit. That means formic will handle validations on submit of form. Okay. Not only submit on form, I want to handle whenever value is changed. That means on change. So on change is equal to formic handle change. Similarly, on blur also I want to verify. Blur means they clicked inside it and came out. That means on blur also I want the formic. So on blur also the formic. So handle blur. That means on which event you want. So I want on two events. The same I have to do for others. That means on blur and on change, it should handle the validations. We have to write like this. Now for price also, on blur and on change, it has to display the validation. And for product also, it has to do code also, it should do the same. That means these are the events to verify. Now one more point is where to display the error message. Name error message must be displayed below the text box. So below the text box, I will keep a div and put text class name. So text danger means if I am using font or if I am using Bootstrap, text danger will keep a red color. Or otherwise, what you have to do is you have to write style, and the style you have to configure color as red. We have to define the color as red. So color as red. So that is how we need to define. Now this contains the message. That means name error message must come here. So how to display the name error message? How we can configure the name error message? What we have to do is we have to just keep here a simple option. Remember, if there is an error, then display the error. Otherwise, so null, nothing to display. Actually, what we do is we can write like this. That means we can write the condition in this way, like formic dot errors dot name. If there is name error, that means we are writing a condition. So that means use a ternary operator. If there is a name error, so if error is there, name error is there, display that error. That means formic dot errors dot name, display that error. Otherwise, put null. That is the condition I am defining. That means if name error contains a message, then display that message. Otherwise, remove that. The same I have to do for price. That means I will go there and I will keep it for the price. That means here we are defining. So if error is having price error, then display the price error. Otherwise empty. So display the price error. Otherwise empty. The same here also. That means the same here also we need to configure. That means for all the options you have to use the same approach. Actually this is price and this is for code. That means here empty and this is for code. This is for code. If code error is there, display the code error. That is what we have to configure. Let's run this and see now. That means we are displaying the error messages there. And you see here, when I click register button, remember you have given three conditions. One condition is on form submit. Another condition is when changed. Another condition is when blur. Now see here, when I click register, then it will display these messages. It says that product name required, product price required, and code required. So I am entering the name, product name. Some name I am entering. So when I am entering the name, so it should accept the name and it should display that. Now several more conditions are there. So we need to configure them. Conditions are nothing but actually what should happen is here. One more important thing is we are selecting some name. It is not accepting because here some more options need to be defined. The options are nothing but, so generally the form that you have designed, that means all the elements so are binded with those values. But one more option you need to know here is generally the validation messages should not fire up immediately. Actually, the validation messages should fire up. The validation messages should fire up only when that particular field has been modified. Only that particular field has been modified. Then I want the validation message to fire up. That is basically how you want to handle the situation. That means here we are having initial values, all of them. Initial values I am configuring all of them. Suppose if I keep it empty, that means you see price is empty. That's not having any value. So, but see, when I click register, all messages are coming. It should not be like that. What we want is the message should fire up. So whenever the element is touched, that means I went there. See, observe carefully. I clicked inside it and clicked outside. It will fire up all messages. It should not fire up all messages. Only that message it should fire up. Then what we do is here we have to write the condition. we have to write the condition in one more condition I have to write. These error messages must display not only when the value is not there, even when it is touched, only when it is touched. That means we need to write the condition like this, touched. Touched means you went there and came out. That means you have to define like this condition. How we define the condition is FRM formic dot touched indicates whether you clicked inside it or not. If touched name and it is not there, that means this indicates that you touched that field and it is not having a value, then the message should fire up. The same we have to do for others. That means we have to say that formic dot touched price, and price is not there. Similarly, they touched the code, so that means formic and touched code. They touched the code and code is not there, then it should fire up. Observe carefully now. I clicked inside price and click outside, then only price have to verify and only code have to verify and only name have to verify. But I touched it or not, how to identify? That means it is not identifying the change, because for that we need to write one more option. That is nothing but, you see, you said that on change it will handle change. On change it is going to handle change. And on blur it is going to handle the blur. Formic is going to handle the change and blur. And we need to bind with the values and configure the values. So here it is unable to identify what values you are typing inside it. That means it is unable to access